Good evening and welcome to Williamwood High Schools Annual Question Time. On our panel tonight, Jackson Carlo, MSP for this constituency of Eastwood and Deputy Leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, representing the SNP, Kirsten Oswald, who is the MP for this constituency of East Renfrewshire, Kirsty Hunter, a six-year pupil here at Williamwood, Neil Bibby, a regional MSP for the Scottish Labour Party, and on my far left, Tomy Sheridan, former co-convener of Solidarity. As usual, we have a number of interesting questions from our audience that I am keen to get through. Therefore, I would ask our panel to keep their answers succinct. I would also encourage contributions from our audience. Just raise your hand and Lucy will get a microphone to you. Question 1 comes from Kate Boland, an advanced higher modern studies pupil.
Does it sound quite muffled?
What do you think the recent election of Donald Trump says about dissatisfaction with politics in America?
Well, unsurprisingly, question 1 is on the topic of Donald Trump. What do you think the election of Donald Trump says about dissatisfaction with politics in America? Jackson Carlo, please.
I think it says just about everything about dissatisfaction with politics in America. And I think he has benefited, as would any other candidate who had come from outside of the perceived elite of politicians in the United States. I mean, I was dismayed, like most people were, the idea that this man has been elected President of the United States. I think it's quite extraordinary. And what does it say? I mean, his homophobic, anti-Muslim, anti-women rhetoric, said by any mainstream politician there or here, would have led to them being bounced out of the whole political debate. But perversely in the United States, it was almost as if to the electorate, somebody speaking like that demonstrated that they weren't a politician and they were voting for somebody who wasn't a politician. And so ludicrously, I think, that rhetoric ended up serving him well. And, you know, how bad did Hillary Clinton have to be, or how much did she have to be associated in the public mind with the establishment for someone like Donald Trump to win? And, you know, we now all have to deal with the consequences of that. We can only hope that, you know, part of it was a cabaret act for the cameras to try and appeal to the electorate, because it'll be almost impossible to work with or to deal with a president who wants to pursue the consequences of that rhetoric once in office.
Thank you. Kirsten Oswald.
Thank you. I do think it is particularly bad news for almost everybody that I can think of that Donald Trump has been elected to be the President of the United States. It's almost the kind of phrase that you think, is that real when you're saying it? It seems so inconceivable, but it is real. And it's particularly dangerous, I think, to think about it in the kind of terms I've been hearing at Westminster. We are hearing that, you know, it's probably going to be okay. He didn't mean it. Well, if he didn't mean it, why did he say it? That means that he is nothing but a liar. If he did mean it, he is all the things that Jackson just described. You know, he's a misogynist, he's a racist, and all kinds of other dangerous things too. I think it's a really worrying time for all of us. I think it says certainly something about dissatisfaction with political elites. I think that's undeniably true, and it's something that we should all consider very carefully. As somebody that is pretty new to this, I think it's very interesting to see that that is the way that America has treated what they felt were the political classes. I'm not sure it had much to do with Hillary Clinton, for what it's worth. I think it was the fact that politicians were seen as too remote and not accessible enough and not really caring for the needs of the people that they should be looking after. So that's certainly something that every politician should remember. And they should also remember that words do matter. The things he said are never acceptable, and I think that it's important that we all say that loudly and clearly.
Neil Bibby.
I think it's clear from the election in America, people there are fed up with living standards, economic growth, and the lack of jobs in the economy. And there's a sense of power hopelessness amongst people, and people being very concerned about the state of the economy. And in a number of the states that Donald Trump won, the post-industrial states where there was a lot of industry, for example, states like Michigan, there was a lot of jobs there. The Rust Belt states, as they called them, he was very successful in those states. So I think there was a lot of anger about whilst immigration was a massive issue in the American election, the economy and jobs was as well. And Donald Trump tried to sell himself as a businessman who could turn the economy around. But as I mentioned about immigration, he did make immigration, and particularly the issue about Mexico and Mexicans coming into the country, a major issue. And let's be clear, immigrants aren't to blame for the problems in the American economy. Immigrants aren't to blame for any problems in the British economy. And I think one of the Democrat nominees, Bernie Sanders, who stood for election on the platform of taking on the vested interests of the billionaires on Wall Street, who are to blame for the global economic crash in 2007 and many of the issues that there are in the economy. So in actual fact, I think, yes, there is an anger with the political elite because there hasn't been enough action taken since that global economic crash to reset the economy in favour of working people. And that's what I would say about that. And in addition, I do agree with the point, and I hope that Donald Trump, some of the things he was saying was an act to get votes. After all, he was a salesman, and some of the comments he's made about working for all Americans I think are helpful, but it remains to be seen. But to be absolutely clear, immigrants aren't the cause of problems in America, and they're the cause of problems now.
Leslie Hunter. Sorry. Like the others have said, I don't think it's necessarily a dissatisfaction with politics, but more with those who are considered to be the political establishment, which is a trend we've also seen with Brexit, although I don't know that the political establishment is necessarily an entirely bad thing. Clinton was described as the face of the establishment, yet she's perhaps the best qualified candidate we've ever seen as president, although obviously she had her faults as well. And though it's compared to Brexit, I think the fault lines were drawn in completely different areas. When we saw the way the vote was divided over Brexit, it was mainly on education and it was on income. Whereas in America, when you look at the statistics, race plays a major factor. 45% of white female college graduates voted for Trump, so it's clearly not gender, despite what Trump said throughout the course of the campaign. And it's not about education. If you take away the white vote from America, every single state would return to Hillary Clinton. So while I don't think people weren't necessarily being racist voting for Trump, race played a huge role in the campaign, and I think sexism may well have done too. The election of Donald Trump said a lot about America, much of which isn't exactly positive, but it also says that America is angry. There's people who think they've been forgotten. They voted for Trump because they felt their voices weren't being heard, and they will be heard for the next 4 years, and we'll see where that leaves America. And Tomy Sheridan.
I think Kirsty's made a whole number of very important points there. I do think the election of Trump is a reflection of a crisis in confidence, respect for establishment politicians, for people who have been in their jobs for many years and are perceived and in reality have lined their own pockets and done very little else for anyone else, other than become even more comfortable than they were before they were elected. And the truth of the matter is that we can all agree here on how absolutely repugnant we think Donald Trump is and how much of a repellent he is. But the fact remains that Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate. Hillary Clinton, if you delve into some of the emails that were released by WikiLeaks, Hillary Clinton was very much open for business, i.e. her own business, selling time to Qatar, to Saudi Arabia, $1 million was paid for a meeting with her husband Bill Clinton. $12 million was paid for Hillary Clinton to attend a dinner in Morocco. The same countries that were paying Hillary Clinton for time were funding ISIS and ISIL. The same organisations who have benefited from the downfall of Colonel Gaddafi, you ought to look at those emails and trace Hillary Clinton's role in the overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi. Now, let's be clear about this. There was no mandate, international or otherwise, to invade Libya and overthrow Colonel Gaddafi. But he was interested in introducing a new currency, a new petrol currency that would challenge the dollar. He had to go because he wasn't singing the tune that the US wanted him to sing. Hillary Clinton's response to the murder of Colonel Gaddafi was, we came, we saw, we killed. And he had a sword inserted in his anal passage. That's how he died. And somehow or other, that was supposed to be something to celebrate. Look at the mess we are in now. Libya, Syria, millions of immigrants who have been displaced from Libya, from Africa, from Syria. We have to learn, folks, that interfering in other people's countries has consequences. And those consequences can be very, very serious. And my final point is this: if you really want, for those that want to blame immigrants for problems in society, if you want to blame immigrants for problems in society, why don't you turn your anger on those who make those people immigrants, those who support the bombing of other countries?
Thank you. Question 2 comes from Catherine Crew.
Given the recent court ruling and opposition in the Scottish Parliament, do you think that Brexit will actually happen?
That was, given the recent court ruling and opposition in the Scottish Parliament, do you think Brexit will actually happen? Kirsten Oswald.
I was asking about Brexit at Westminster again this week. All that I know is that Brexit still means Brexit. It is the most astonishingly opaque situation that we can begin to imagine. I have no idea how we have come to be in this position. That we have the government at Westminster, who evidently do not have a plan. They didn't have a plan to begin with. They went into this imagining, I think we can all be very confident, that we wouldn't be looking at Brexit because they thought that this wasn't a situation which would ever happen. They found that, unfortunately, it has happened that people in the United Kingdom as a whole have voted to leave the EU. People in Scotland didn't. People in this constituency voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU for very good reasons. So I have to say that I think that the overall situation in the UK is as clear as mud. I would like to give you a more definite answer, but I'm not able to do that, not from want of asking questions. It is a particularly difficult time. It's quite concerning, I think, when you see some of the pre-negotiation behaviour of people like Boris Johnson. I think that is most unhelpful and quite unedifying. I do think that Nicola Sturgeon has absolutely stood up and shown herself to be the one person who did anticipate that things can go in different ways. She did have a plan. She clearly does have every iron she possibly can in the fire to try and secure what Scotland voted for, which is our position in the EU.
Kirsty Hunter. I think the short answer is, much as I hate the idea, I think Brexit will happen, because if it is put to a vote for Parliament, like the recent ruling in the High Court suggests will happen, the problem is, do MPs vote with their constituencies, or do they vote for what they believe will be the best for their country? And that's a decision I'm very glad I don't have to make. But what I think the vote in Parliament can be used to do is to negotiate with the government to force them to reveal what their plans are for Brexit. We've had, as Kirsten said, Brexit means Brexit, and we've had nothing since then, which gives us no faith that our government actually know what they're doing. And since there is this lack of faith in the government, what we have to do is make sure that the law is upheld at every single turn. And that's why the attack in the papers on the 3 judges is disgraceful. The government should have come out far stronger in their defence of the judges, even if their decisions put them at a disadvantage, because you can't have the population thinking that as the government behaves, so should we, and that the law is only relevant when it suits you. Tomy Sheridan.
It's a question that's got so many other questions lead from it. Kirsty's comment there is very interesting, because obviously what the judges have done is they have determined that in order for Brexit to actually happen, it must go back to the Parliament, because Parliament in the unwritten constitution that exists within the UK is supreme. And here's where you have a philosophical debate and discussion. We don't have a written constitution. Which is wrong. We should have a written constitution. Everyone should be able to know what your rights and your responsibilities are. We have a non-written constitution in the UK, and they're saying that Parliament is supreme. Parliament can change any law. Parliament could pass a law that you're not allowed to spit in the streets of Paris. To pass a law, it doesn't even mean it's going to happen, but they're allowed to do that. The point I would make is, where do the people fit in? Because if you've got a referendum that expresses the will, whether you like that will or not, then should that trump Parliament? Or is Parliament more important than the expression of the will of the people? There is clearly, for those of us who believe in independence, there is clearly a cogent argument to say, well, it's okay to talk about the will of the people in England and Wales, because they did vote to exit Europe. But the people of Scotland didn't. But even that, and I'm sorry to go on, but even that has got a lot of complications. I remember picking up a copy of the Daily Record in Sainsbury's, no, I'm not buying it, just reading it, the day before the Brexit vote. And it was a remarkable front page, some of you may remember seeing it. And what was remarkable about it was, there are 5 political parties represented in the Scottish Parliament, and there was pictures of every one of the leaders of the 5 parties in the Scottish Parliament. And every one of them were united, calling for a Remain vote, calling for the people of Scotland to vote Remain. And absolutely correct, Scotland did. But 39% of Scotland voted to leave. 39%, and I was one of them. I was one of them who voted to leave, because I think the European Union as an institution is fundamentally corrupt and undemocratic and certainly anti-socialist. So as a socialist, I certainly couldn't support the European Union. But the question is this: if all of the 5 political parties and political leaders in the Scottish Parliament were calling for people to vote Remain, then who was speaking for that 39% of Scots who voted to leave? So there is a disengagement here in this question. Let's not assume that everybody who supports independence also supports remaining in the European Union. I support independence, but I like to think that I support genuine independence, and that is that when we have an independent Scotland, we won't be told by Brussels what we can and can't do with our economy when, for instance, we want to take our shipyards back, or we want to take steel into public ownership. We won't have Brussels bureaucrats telling us, no, you can't do that because of the competition laws. So, it's a complicated question, but yes, I think Brexit's going to happen, because I think it's the will of the people.
Neil Bibby?
Yeah, I just agree with the last point Tommy made there. I do think Brexit will happen because of the will of the people expressed during the referendum on the 23rd of June, and I and the Labour Party accept and respect the result. But I think what's imperative now is that we fight for the best possible Brexit deal that we can get. That although a decision has been taken that the United Kingdom will leave the European Union, there is no, and there's a mandate for that, there's no mandate for the terms of Brexit, and I think that's a very important point, and that's where the Supreme Court ruling on the UK Parliament's scrutiny of the Brexit negotiations is very, very important, and it's absolutely vital that the Parliament, UK Parliament, has a scrutiny role over those negotiations and the triggering of Article 50. I think that's absolutely correct, because there is no Brexit plan at the moment, and I think that's probably because David Cameron and nobody really thought there was going to be a Brexit vote. So we have to, if we're going to leave the European Union, we absolutely have to get this right, and it has to get maximum scrutiny of the terms of leaving the European Union. I'll give you two examples. One example is we absolutely must protect the workers' rights that are enshrined in European Union law. The Great Repeal Act that's been talked about by the Prime Minister cannot be an excuse for diluting any rights that people have gained through employment in this country, and that is an absolute red line for the Labour Party, and I'm sure it will be for other people as well. That's just one example. There's many other examples as well. We need to look at to see how we can maintain access to the single market. I voted Remain in the election, and there was a majority voted Leave, but there was a sizable number of people that voted Remain who were reluctant Remainers, who voted on grounds of perhaps economic reasons, and maintaining those economic benefits of our relationship with the European Union is absolutely vital as well. So all these things need to be scrutinised to get the best possible deal for the United Kingdom, for Scotland, but importantly for people, and ensuring their rights that have been gained by EU membership are protected.
And finally, Jackson Carlo.
Thank you. Actually, I agree with a little bit of everything that's been said. And I'll start with the point that Tomy Sheridan was making, because he's right. The Scottish Parliament is meant to be a proportionally elected Parliament, and by being a proportionally elected Parliament is therefore meant to better represent the overall balance of opinion in Scotland. And only 7 MSPs voted to leave in the debate we had in the Parliament. If the Scottish Parliament had reflected the vote in the country, it would have been nearly 48 MSPs who would have voted to leave to reflect the public. So I think that there is a genuine disconnect there, and I've raised this in Parliament in passing because I think it's something we can't be complacent about. We were taking one line and there was a very clear strand across Scotland taking another. In fact, more people voted to leave the European Union in June than voted for Nicola Sturgeon to be the First Minister of Scotland just a few weeks before in May. And that is a very striking fact. Over 1 million Scots said they wanted to leave. Now, I'm one of those who voted to remain. I fought, like others, quite hard to remain. In the Scottish referendum, I voted to stay in the UK, but Alex Salmon quoted me more than once in the Scottish Parliament because I said that if I lost the independence referendum in 2014, I would have manned the barricades with every other Scot to get the best possible deal for Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom as an independent country. I would have respected the result, and that's where I stand today. I voted for Scotland as part of the United Kingdom to remain. I lost, and my objective now is to get the best possible deal for Scotland and the United Kingdom out of the European Union. And in any negotiation, if you tip the other side to what you want from it before you walk in the door, you're already flagging up what your red lines and other objectives are. So I understand, yes, we need to have, by the time we trigger Article 50, some clarity as to what the overall objectives of the UK position in Europe will be, and that has to be supported by all of the other devolved administrations as part of a united negotiating position. But I don't want to be looking at the small fine print, because I think that would only seek to undermine the deal we might get. Now, I sit on the European Committee in Parliament. We've been across to Brussels. I've met with many of the European ambassadors to the European Union there. They think we're going to leave. So the answer to the question, are we going to leave? The Europeans think we're going to leave. I think it's pretty certain we are going to leave. But what they have said is there is a differential deal for Scotland potentially within that exit strategy. And they said to me, and to the rest of the MSPs from all parties who were there, to get that, the Scottish Government has to work cooperatively with the Westminster Government, because the rest of Europe sees the Westminster Government as the negotiating member state, and the state with the vote. So if the Westminster government and the Scottish government simply stand on the sidelines and shout at each other, the words of the ambassadors, and I quote what they said because I thought it was very significant, the shutters will come down and we will not negotiate any variable deal for Scotland. So Nicola Sturgeon strutting across Downing Street tarmac to posture before the cameras, whatever Kirsten may think about her showing great leadership, the leadership she has to show now, as the Mayor of London is showing this week by saying London's open for business and working with the government to get the best possible representation of London's agenda, what Nicola Sturgeon has to do is to ensure that the best possible negotiating position for Scotland in Europe is the one we now all fight together to secure. Because there's no point, there's no advantage to us leaving the European Union and finding Scotland at a second best deal because we were fighting amongst one another.
Respond to that. I didn't know quite what the rules were because I understand that it's been requested of us that we behave in a nice collegiate manner.
Listen, it's a scoosh compared to last year with David Coburn. This is going to be
It's something that I've never been compared to. I think it's really interesting what Jackson says, and I think that we do need to stop and take a little step back. We voted to remain within the EU. Scotland voted very significantly to remain within the EU. East Renfrewshire voted overwhelmingly to remain within the EU. And we do need to take account of that. We need to take full account of that. I don't think it is accurate to characterise people as strutting or posturing or whatever it was that Jackson said. I think that unfortunately sometimes that's how these things are put across. But I think that it is the First Minister of Scotland's job to secure the best possible outcome for Scotland out of this process, which we should never have been in the first place. It is basically the result of a Tory infight which has gone wrong. Let's make the very best of it, and that does mean that as a Scottish government, Nicola Sturgeon, as leader of that government, must do everything she can to secure our place in Europe, to secure the economic and social benefits that come from that. That's her job. She's doing her job, and I'm very glad she is.
It's getting interesting. Okay, this is where I gently remind you that I would like contributions from the audience. It normally kicks in at around question 3, and I think given the topic of question 3, it serves